Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy, and this is Jamie from the Heart of Missouri RPDC. Welcome back to our podcast, Learning Without Limits, PCBL Conversations from the Heart of Missouri. Today, we bring you episode 2, where we're talking about real world learning components of personalized competency-based learning.
We know teachers are super busy, and so we want to focus really on what's realistic and what can be helpful. We are very fortunate to have people within our Heart of Missouri RPDC that can support teachers in bringing real world learning and career pathways into their classrooms. Stacy, can you do the honors and introduce today's guests?
Yes. Today, joining us, we have two amazing guests from the Heart of Missouri RPDC. First of all, we have Angie Fadness, and second of all, Roberta Carson. Can you please introduce yourselves, ladies?
Sure, but I don't know about the amazing part, but I can introduce myself. I'm Angie Fadness, and I'm the Registered Youth Apprenticeship Consultant for the RPDC. I cover Central and Northeast Missouri, and I just support schools in developing registered youth apprenticeships.
I'm Roberta Carson, and I am the Missouri Career Pathways Consultant for the RPDC. I support schools by getting teachers out of their classroom and exploring different career opportunities for their students, not for them, for their students.
All right. Thank you both for being here.
Yeah, so let's start just kind of simple. When teachers hear about real world learning and career pathways in education, Angela, can you tell us more about what does that look like from the Registered Youth Apprenticeship Program?
Sure. So sometimes I use terms like real world learning and work-based learning interchangeably. I just want to say that before I get started. I feel like registered youth apprenticeship is kind of like one tool in that toolbox. So basically, registered youth apprenticeship, it brings together a school to sponsor an opportunity with a local business where the student comes in, they get paid. They get related instruction through their classroom experiences that support their job and on-the-job training. And then that student can earn a nationally recognized credential through the Department of Labor. And so that's in a nutshell what RYA is. Right now, we've got about 60 school districts across the state that are participating, and it's going to look a little bit different just depending on the school size and the businesses that are available. Most students get to leave part of the day to go to those jobs, and because it's through the government, it's registered, there are actual work competencies that students have to be able to do on the job repetitively, safely, and on their own. And so they really are truly learning. This is different than a student just going out and getting a job, which there's a place for that. And there's a need to learn those just work ethic skills. But this is really a student being trained in a specific occupation.
Great, thank you.
Good. Roberta, can you tell us about career pathways and what that looks like in schools?
Sure. Angie brought up a good point when she said that RYA is one aspect or one tool in the toolkit. My program helps teachers build a toolkit. As a former classroom teacher, I knew my subject, I knew how to teach it, but I didn't know a whole lot else. And one of the things teachers realize when they go on a career pathway event is that, you don't know what you don't know until you experience it. So we get teachers out of that comfort zone of the classroom where they know everything and put them into a real world setting. And that could be a hospital, it could be a manufacturing plant, it could be a research lab, it can be a construction site. But they see firsthand the skill set that is needed, the type of work. They understand what careers are emerging. They see what careers are needed in their community. And they can also see where their subject matter is relevant in creating that worker. And I consider that one of the most important parts. I taught language arts, so I heard when am I ever going to use this? Too many times, But I now would know the relevancy of those communication skills and would be able to explain that and be teaching students to look beyond sophomore language arts and the next level and the next level to how they would use it in the real world. The other part of career pathways that I think is very important is that it shows the teacher how significant they are in the economic development of their community. I believe very strongly that a vibrant community has to have a successful school. It goes hand in hand. And when you see that companies will decide to open a plant in a community because of the value of the schools and the training that the future workers would have, that means that teacher is a key player in the economic ecosystem of that community in that region. And at a time when teachers often feel kind of forgotten or attacked, it's kind of nice to know that you're important. You're very important. So the relevancy and also the intentionality of being able to say, all right, we're doing this lesson this way because this is a skill you will need later on in your life is very important. So you're teaching language arts skills, but you're also teaching very important foundational skills for employment.
Great. So I heard you both say it's really about making that learning relevant, but for both the students and the teachers, and allowing them to have that connection piece back to their community, and not necessarily being separate things, but how are these things all connected and intertwined together?
Mhm.
Great.
Absolutely. I love like Roberta's talking about, I heard somebody speaking was saying that you truly are as a teacher an economic developer. And I think that we just need to start seeing ourselves as that piece in the puzzle. Absolutely.
And seeing all the different options. There's once you graduate, there's a lot of options. There's many paths available to students to be successful and to have a good career. And as a teacher, if I know about RYA, I can support that student that wants to start that path sooner.
Yeah. Great.
So let's talk about the students. So when students participate in your programs, what differences do you notice? Angie, can we start with you?
Sure. So I got the opportunity actually to go to a couple of signing events if they're ever in your community. So what happens is that just like we have sports signings, we have, decision day. Apprenticeship is also a very noteworthy thing to take a to pause and recognize these students and what they're committing to. And so just to see the pride on these students' faces, I think is really invaluable. I think these students start immediately feeling purpose because sometimes we hear internship and that's another tool in the toolbox, but it has a different connotation than saying I'm an apprentice. It kind of gives them an elevated status, I feel like. There has been there's been research that's been done. It does help increase student attendance, other issues like that. There is a behavior component to this because students have to be performing well in school to participate in registered youth apprenticeships. So I think that that's kind of a carrot that has seen student growth as well. But I think the big advantage is, or the big piece that we see it is really in the students in that connecting with the local business, to see those local businessmen, their mentors that are on the job with them, to really brag on these students as I think you really see the true impact in not just the students' lives, the business life, but the community, that they're becoming a piece of that community.
Roberta?
Angie just mentioned something that I thought was really important, and that is that student becomes a part of the community, an important member by being that apprenticeship. Particularly in rural and smaller communities, you don't want to lose your students. You want to keep your talent local. And by participating in apprenticeships, that employer is being able to develop that student, that apprentice, into the type of worker and employee that is needed. And that student begins to feel really needed and essential. And I think many kids miss that now. They don't always feel that way. So the apprenticeship does a great deal, I think, for self-confidence and for that sense of belonging. Now, from my standpoint, most of my job deals with teachers and not students. However, we have teachers that after they've gone on some of the pathways experiences want to share that experience with their students. So the career advisor at the RPDC often will set up student career days. So we will have students that will then experience what the teachers had experienced before. So the teacher comes home, talks up something, says, this is really cool, and this is why it's important. But we also know that kids can, after a while, tune you out as a teacher. So when they hear it from the horse's mouth, if that student hears from me that yes, geometry is really important in welding, and so is understanding the science of metallurgy, they're going to say blah, blah, blah. But if they hear it from a welder, it has a different impact. And I know that from being with some kids that the one student turned to his teacher and said, "Well, I guess I have to start doing my math homework," because he wanted to be a welder. And he realized, oh, this is important. What's being taught to me in school matters in my later life.
And Roberta, you kind of touched on this because you said you do deal more with teachers in your program. So what do you hear from teachers and how what do they get out of it when they are a part of your career pathways program?
I think one of the most impressive things, and this speaks a lot to how well teachers know their students, because they're with them every day. So they know their strengths, they know their weaknesses. And when they will tour somewhere, they'll say, I'm going to go back and tell so and so. This would be a perfect career for that person. So they're able to bring in knowledge of careers, knowledge of employment trends to the classroom. And eventually you do graduate from high school and you have to become an adult and get a job. So students are going to be listening to that. And teachers are the number one influencer. So when a teacher is saying, this is a really cool occupation you should look at, they're going to pay attention to that. And many teachers will feel that what they're doing has significance because they're teaching a fundamental or essential skill that is necessary. That math teacher isn't going to be teaching how to do TIG welding, but that math teacher will be teaching the geometry that is necessary for making that successful weld. So they come out of it feeling like what they're doing is relevant and it has meaning. And quite frankly, they enjoy making the relationships and partnerships with employers because that adds one more layer to what they can do in the classroom.
Awesome. And Angela, what about you? What feedback do you hear from teachers from your program?
Well, I think I'm going to touch on something that Roberta just said that I think maybe are the strength of the teachers that I work with is that piece of knowing your students. A big piece of what we do are vetting students to make sure we're getting them in the right place. And so the big thing I hear from teachers is the impact they have when they can come to a student and present a path that they know is going to be um, really good for that student because I think it allows that student to really feel seen in that moment. And so I think that's the big connection that I see as far as with teachers and students that I hear from them. And I think it's the same thing, students, because we as teachers, I mean, that's what we want, right? We want to provide those growth opportunities for students. And I think whenever they can present it as a job and you're going to get paid and all these things, and here's a clear pathway for you. And many times these are students that, we're not particularly interested in going to college or other avenues. We know they're going straight to work, but here's an avenue that really does involve education and a career path. And so I think that's what I hear from teachers is their own satisfaction as educators to be able to start students along that path. I hope that answers your question in a
Absolutely.
roundabout way.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mhm.
So it sounds like your programs have so many benefits for students and teachers and communities.
Mhm.
And Angela and Roberta both, I'll start with you, Angela, but you've kind of talked about your program deals more with high school students. But how can elementary students, I mean, even down to kindergarten or middle school students and teachers kind of start to get into these real world learning experiences?
Well, I really think conversations like this are really important in education. And I think not just having the conversation, it's not like students show up their freshman year and all of a sudden we know that eventually they're going to have to get a job, right? Eventually they're going to need a career path. And I think having these conversations K through 12 are really important. I always say that, for schools that are thinking about registered youth apprenticeship, it puts a really nice bookend on work-based learning because it really is what I would say the gold standard of work-based learning. But then it gives you something that you can say, if I want a student prepared to do an RYA, what are all the things they need along the way? And, one of those is just exposure. I mean, apprenticeship in general is not something that probably a lot of elementary teachers are even aware of. Straight to work into the workforce is probably not a lot of what they talk about when they talk about career exploration. I think we still kind of are highlighting what are those college-based degree kind of careers for students, and really getting students exposed to what is the local businesses in their community. How can they start their own business? And to me, it's really a lot about exposure, having guest speakers come in and talk about their jobs. Like Roberta was saying, adults coming into a building mean a lot to a student. And we probably all have memories ourselves that we think back to when this person came in, or I did this assignment, or I did that really impacted our life. And so I think that the more that you can just communicate with your local business community, get them in the building, but also get students out if age will allow it to take some tours, but let them to see the variety of things that are out there and not feel like just because maybe school's a little bit harder for me, I'm never going to be able to do the things I want to do. Open their eyes to their opportunities.
Roberta, do you have any other thoughts on how elementary, middle school teachers can support career exploration in their classrooms?
Well, my program does allow teachers from fifth grade through 12th grade to participate in Pathways events. We're Perkins funded, so that's why we have that age limit. But I agree with Angie, getting kids exposure and also beginning to decide what I like, what are my values. It's very important for learning who you are and what you like and dislike. So when you're in high school, you're not suddenly, confronted with this I did, building that self-awareness and using some of the materials that are available. I know Missouri Connections is offered free from DESE, and they now have an elementary version, which is called Career Track, which introduces different careers to students. I fully believe in getting people into the schools. To me, that's good PR because if you bring in the community sees the work that we're doing and they're more willing to support it. And they can share what career they have and what skills are important and why they like that particular job. I would try to get kids out into the community. I know schools that have taken kids, if the school is usually if it's a smaller school and it's close to, say, downtown, they literally take them on tours. So they can meet store owners. They can go to City Hall. They can go to the fire department. They can go to the police department, and they begin to see how a city functions and what's important for it functioning. Um, I would have parents come in to describe what they do, but getting kids aware because in eighth grade they have to write that ICAP, the individual career and academic plan. So you want it to have some meaning. And if you haven't done any exposure and exploration of careers, it's going to be very hard for that student to write that with any sense of usefulness. So I certainly would encourage them to do as much as they can to get kids to see the bigger picture, the bigger world. Um, so yes, um, tours, interviews, people coming in to do presentations, let those kids see what's out there and why they're learning what they are so they can be successful in the bigger world.
And the only thing I would add to that is, one of the big things that we hear from business owners, employers, is the need for soft skills in students.
Yes.
And so maybe on those elementary levels, we know those are the people that are really, every day they're doing behavior, right? So maybe that's having more meaningful conversations with students with, yes, we stand in a line because you need to have some self-control because, you might have a job one day where you work on big machines and you have to be safe. And so I think anytime you can bring in those conversations to students to that back to the work level, like someday you're going to be doing these things. And that's why it matters that you can sit still for a certain amount of time. I'm just trying to think of the things that teachers struggle with that there are a connection to the adults that they're going to be.
I think Angie's spot on with that. Um, it's been a long time since I was in elementary school, but I think back to what my elementary teachers were teaching me, along with reading. They were teaching me how to behave at school, the social skills that are important, sharing, listening to others, collaborating, self-regulation, as Angie brought up. All of those skills are going to be incredibly important in a workplace. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you lack those, I prefer to call them essential skills, you're not going to be successful. When DESE created its definition of a success-ready student, it was the knowledge, skills, behaviors, and experiences to be successful in all aspects of life. So keeping in mind behaviors, hopefully, at least from the high school teacher perspective, we want to see addressed at the elementary level. So a student has those skill sets early and can be successful as students and then be successful as adults. So I would certainly stress that. And if I had someone come in and talk about careers, I would have them really stress the soft skill aspect of what they do, because the skills, the technical skills, are going to change almost yearly, but those soft skills endure.
Awesome. Ladies, this has been wonderful. And we just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today. I think we can all see how this real world learning component of personalized competency-based learning is so important. And it's just wonderful and amazing that we have both of you here as consultants with the Heart of Missouri RPDC, and that you're willing to be able to help support students, teachers, and the communities that we all live in.
Thank you so much for listening. Our next episode will be released in December, featuring Malia Franklin, who is one of the facilitators for PCBL in Missouri. And we hope you'll continue to join us on our journey learning more about personalized competency-based learning and what it can look like for your students.